Okay, recording is on.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So welcome to the Bloomington Rotary Club celebration of service for June 30th, 2020. I'm the current club president for a few hours yet, Aaron Davis, and it's great to see everyone here, including our special guests. Our pledge is going to be led today by past president and past district governor Jim Bright.
Okay. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States.
Of the United States of
America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice
for all. Hey, thank you, President Aaron, and welcome everybody. A special welcome to our guests. Today is the last day of our Rotary year, and I've got to say I've never been prouder to be a Bloomington Rotarian than I am today. Wonderful group of people, impressive year of accomplishments, and what an incredible year of change. At this time last year, we had no idea that we would be meeting today from the comfort of our homes, and some of us in our work pajamas. But I found this to be true, whether we meet over lunch at the Union or whether we meet in a breakout room group before a Zoom meeting, just as we did some of us a little while ago, we are making friendships for life. At our June 12th district Zoom meeting, District Governor Santana Nadeau recognized President Aaron and our club for an outstanding Rotary year with the District Governor Citation. I don't want to steal Aaron's thunder, but be sure to be here next week when Aaron tells us about some of the many, many wonderful things that we did as a team under Aaron's leadership. So next week, Aaron too will turn over the bell and the gavel to our new president, Ashley Sullivan. Now, with COVID-19 and social distancing, we face many challenges and opportunities in the coming year. And here are just a few of the questions that we as a club will have to address. How will we meet? And when and where will we meet? How will we become more diverse and inclusive? How will we serve more young people through our sponsorships of Rotaract and Interact? How will we continue to have a positive impact on our community through Teachers Warehouse and other service projects when it may not be possible to work side by side, elbow to elbow, as we have in the past? And with our Bloomington Rotary Toast just 4 months away on Friday, November 6th, how will we raise money to support our service projects when it's no longer possible to stage an elegant dinner in person as we've done so successfully with the other two clubs in each of the last 5 years? Well, you'll be glad to know that we have teams already stepping up to address these questions. Well, one thing for sure, we must keep you, our members, engaged and eager to stay with us. We must continue to embrace our mantra of service above self and our core values of service, fellowship, integrity, diversity, and leadership. Again, we must make the most of our partnership with Megan Gerhardt and her Rotaract team members. We need their energy, commitment, and leadership now more than ever. Please take a note on that, Megan. With our four-way test plus one, our long-time commitment to eradicate polio, with peace and conflict resolution in our DNA, this is a special moment for Rotary as an institution and for our clubs and the other 35,000 clubs throughout the world. Now, on Saturday, we installed Jessica Hain of Bloomington Sunrise, a young mother of 4 kids, ages 2 through 7, and the HR manager at Oliver Winery, as our new district governor. And Jessica introduced her leadership team, including from our club, Lance Eberly, membership co-chair and district governor nominee, Sarah Laughlin as assistant district governor, and Lauren Snyder is Rotary Youth Leadership Awards chair. And she also thanked Joy Harder for Joy's many years of service as the RILA co-chair. Now, Jessica outlined goals for our district, including growing membership, stepping up our efforts to become more diverse and inclusive, and increasing our support of Rotary's many good works throughout the world through the Rotary Foundation. And Jessica challenges and asks all of us to talk up Rotary with our friends and neighbors, including those who are with us here today as our guests. Now, with Ashley Sullivan as our club president, Sally Gaskell as our president-elect, so many of you are my fellow Bloomington Rotarians on our board and on our committees, with Jessica Hain as our district governor. And I can promise you one thing: Bloomington Rotary will be even stronger at this time next year. Back to you, President Aaron.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. We will, well, before we introduce guests, I want to call upon past President Mike Baker, excuse me, to present a Paul Harris Fellowship.
Well, we wouldn't be meeting today if it wasn't for Paul Harris in 1905, who met with three friends and decided to get together on a regular basis and share ideas and thoughts, and it led to the formation of Rotary. And in 1957, the board decided to recognize an award named after Paul Harris, which is the Paul Harris Fellow. That's my job today. Many club members steadily contribute quarterly, some once a year. Many start out slowly and step up later in their Rotary years. Often a Rotarian excels at community service or is recognized by their club for really setting the bar for supporting club and Rotary International projects. Today, we have the honor and pleasure of recognizing our fellow Rotarian, Alon Barker, as our newest Paul Harris Fellow. Alon has done all of the above, not only making regular contributions to Rotary International, but equally as important, serving our club in many outstanding ways. In my presidential year, many members of our club stepped up to help with a lot of projects. The most daunting one to me was coming up with the Centennial Program, and so many people worked on that. It seemed a little overwhelming. There was so much to do, and we wanted to make it really something special that we could use to attract other members. Alon stepped in with his many skills, helped keep our focus, had a lot of spreadsheets that we started out with, and we got there with a wonderful program that we're still able to use today. I know that he stepped up and helped President Lauren, and especially this year, he has really stepped up and helped us and our club, and has acted as our conductor of meetings, which I think is inappropriate for someone from the Jacobs School of Music. It gives me great pleasure to present Alon with his first Paul Harris Fellow pin and certificate, joining many from this club and all over the world, including fellow countryman Nelson Mandela. Please accept our congratulations and sincere thanks for your commitment to our club, to Rotary International, our goals of world understanding and peace, and really your amazing support of our club and each of us as we've dealt with some technological issues this year. So please join me in recognizing Alon Barker as our newest Paul Harris Fellow.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate that and feel very honored.
Thank you. Well done. And as if that's not enough, Alon, I know it's not your birthday, but it is time for another presentation. The President's Award, my President's Award for this year. Alon Barker, Senior Lecturer in Music and Director, Music Entrepreneurship and Career Development at IU's Jacobs School of Music. In Rotary, Alain is our Communications Committee co-chair, contributing his Zoom account and expertise in order to co-produce these virtual celebrations of service. Going on our 4th month of that, weekly. So that's no small effort. In addition to our Rotary Cafe social hours. As communications co-chair with Katie Beck, Alain has been planning and implementing our social media and website activities also. And that is not to mention Alain's remarkable video reflection on April 28th.
Yeah.
So Alain, I present you with the certificate, which is about to appear. Thank you, Alain.
Thank you very, very much, Aaron. Much, much appreciated. And now we will go away.
Well, very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to acknowledge our greeters, Jim Bright, Michael Shermis, Ashley Sullivan, and Katie Beck. I think Katie's here. And producers, Alain Barker and Michael Shermis, and our roundabout reporter, Bill Perkins. And let's start introducing some of our many guests. Jim Bright, you've got a roster over there.
Yeah, thank you so much, President Aaron. We're pleased to have with us today a number of Rotary guests from Brown County, President Beverly Teach. Welcome, Beverly. From Sunrise, we have Carolyn Fry and Lynn Tiemann. Welcome. Randy Wheeler from Evansville. Julia Johnson from Bedford. Any other Rotary guests? Okay, and to continue here, we're pleased to have back with us today Marcus Debro, Assistant Principal at Bloomington High School North. Welcome back, Marcus. Lisa Fukuda, Office of IU Research and wife of Global Grant Scholar Cos Fukuda. Lisa, welcome. Mary Morgan with the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Mary. Christina Mullis, the IU School of Public Health, a PhD candidate, former Rotaract District Governor, Southern California, and the sister of Sunrise Rotary President Melissa Stone. We also have with us today Megan Gerhardt, the IU Rotaract Club, and pleased to have back with us today special recognition for our most senior member, Fred Dunn, who joined our club way back in 1973. Fred, so glad you're tuning in today. We have some more guests. Owen, did you want to introduce your guest?
Yeah, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a woman that 39 of my friends and I got to know in Havana 5 years ago. She visited Bloomington on her first trip out of Cuba in 2016 and visited one of our Bloomington Rotary meetings in person. She now lives in Spain. I'm happy to introduce Alicia Perez.
Welcome. Welcome.
And Trent Deckard, you have some guests as well, I know.
I sure do, and I'm so excited to see all these guests here today. This makes me very, very happy. First off, I want to welcome Ashley Reed with Express Employment. We appreciate you being here. Also, my very good friend, Jennifer Crossley. I saw her earlier. Jennifer's the head of the Monroe County Democratic Party, and she's extremely active in our community. I believe her husband, Justin Crossley, who's been with us before, and some of you may recall him from his work with WTIU and both French Lick, and he's one of the few people I have ever met, maybe the only, that's won an Emmy. Can't say that every day. I also saw, I know we said Mary Morgan, but it was good to see her. I saw former Bloomington City Clerk Regina Moore with us today. It's good to see you, Madam Clerk. And I think Sarah Laughlin thought that Bill Brown might be here. And Bill, if you are here, welcome back. It's good to see you as well. Good to have all these guests with us.
Have we missed anybody?
And Laura Calkins with the Bloomington Salt Cave.
Terrific.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay. Well, greetings and welcome everyone to the Rotary Club of Bloomington, Indiana. I'll start with a couple of birthdays. We have two July 4th birthdays, Keith Klein, past president, and Joyce Pauling. And we have two membership anniversaries this week. Craig Spence, 18 years, and John Bender, past president in 1980 to 1981, who's currently honorary, and this is his 50th anniversary in Rotary. So for Rotarians in the news, we're always in the news, but I do want to give a special shout out to Jeff Baldwin, Ashley Sullivan, and Jessica Hain for their innovative and very successful virtual Smart Girls, Strong Women fundraising event for the Boys and Girls Clubs. Rotary Rotary action updates will put off, and those will be in the roundabout. Let's see, but I do want to mention that the district governor induction ceremony on Saturday morning had at least 13 of our club members there, which is very impressive, as well as two Rotaractors, Marin and Megan. Do we have happy dollars? Yes, welcome all of our guests. We're very glad to have you here.
I don't have a happy dollar, but I'm wondering if anybody has an update on that, on Dr. Spence.
Well, Jim probably does. Jim Bright.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I talked to Craig yesterday, and he continues to make slow but steady progress. He's happy with his arrangement there out on 446 at Gentry Park. He told me last week he misspoke. He said he expected to be there another 2 weeks, but yesterday he tells me he really meant 2 months. But he is making some progress, and I'll tell him you asked about him.
I have a happy dollar.
Hey, Martha.
Yeah. I have a happy dollar for Aaron's brother, Gary, who had a kidney transplant yesterday after waiting for several years, and he seems to be recovering well in the hospital. And we're really happy to have that over with. So good for Gary and good for Aaron.
Thank you, and thank you to our other Emmy winner.
Oh.
And I have a happy dollar to celebrate Alon's becoming a Paul Harris Fellow and receiving the President's citation. Congratulations from all of us.
I have a happy dollar for a service well done for us for last year as a president. And it is worth $20 rather than $1. Also, I'm offering $1 to see my good friend Marcus Dubrow as a guest today.
I have a happy dollar.
Sarah. Yes, Sarah.
I have a happy dollar. This is my last day as president of Teachers Warehouse, and I'm happy to say that I think Teachers Warehouse is in really good shape. You may be wondering what's up with the supply drive that we've done on the first weekend of August for the last several years. It was a key source of supplies for us. We stand by because we're going to move it online. If you thought you couldn't push crayons through your broadband, think again. So we just met this morning. We're almost ready to work on that. And so I'm not leaving the board. I'm moving back to be the recording secretary. And I'm certainly not leaving as a volunteer. But at Teachers Warehouse will open on July 27th because school is opening. So if you're interested in volunteering and bold enough to do it with the mask on, we think we have all of our COVID-19, protections in place.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your wonderful work with
My pleasure.
Teachers Warehouse, which is very close, very dear to our hearts. Do we have one more?
I've got three happy dollars because we got 3 inches of rain last night. And I'm going to throw in another $1 for my friend Jim Sims. Every time I see him with that headset, I wondered if he was ever a disc jockey. You look like a disc jockey, very official. So the 4 happy dollars today.
Or a pilot.
Okay. Councilman Sims.
I guess I get to be last. No, I did some work down at WFHB, but mostly we wear a headphone when I do city council. They make sure that we plugged in with headphones. So I'm just kind of used to it. But I have a happy dollars today, and it's multiply fold. First, I'd like to thank Tim Jessen for that nice article that I read when I got back into town. Very enlightening, and I enjoyed reading it. Secondly, we have many, many guests, and I want to welcome everyone, but specifically Regina Moore, Marcus Devereaux, and Jennifer Crossley. All of these folks, with the possible exception of Jennifer, I've known for decades. But it's been close to a decade with Jennifer. So glad that we got all these guests and specifically them. And I hope Natalie is keeping track of these happy dollars because I don't get to see my Rotarian friends in person as much as I like. So thank you.
Okay, we do have time for one more. Thank you, Jen.
I'm trying.
Sure.
I have happy dollars for exactly the same people that Jim said. Really happy to have Marcus Devereaux and Jennifer Crossley and Regina here. I hope we can see them back.
Very good. Thank you all. Yeah, this is a great club. It's been an incredible honor to be in this position. And I'm sure that Ashley will feel exactly the same and get the kind of support that I've had has been very, very wonderful. And now I would like to introduce Fred Kate. I'd like to welcome Fred first, the IU Vice President for Research, who is going to introduce our special guest speaker.
Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate the invitation, the chance to be here. In fact, I think the invitation was first extended to President McRobbie to introduce Dr. Sen, and unfortunately, he could not do it, and so I begged for the opportunity to do it. So I understand, however, you don't want my introduction to take longer than Dr. Sen's presentation does, so I will just be brief here. I won't read all of his titles, but he is the Stanley Battersby Chair and Professor of Surgery and Director of the Center for the Indiana Center for Regenerative Medicine and Engineering. He is also Executive Director of our Comprehensive Wound Center. He holds many administrative titles, including serving as Associate Vice President for Research. But if I may, I'd just like to say that I have the good fortune to work with many researchers who are doing important work transforming all of our lives, but none more committed, more successful, or more engaging than Dr. Shandon Sen. He brings a passion to his work, an enthusiasm, and a sense of the possible. And so especially during this very difficult time during the COVID-19 pandemic, when a lot of us spend a lot of time dealing with obstacles, Shandon seems to see nothing but opportunities, nothing but ways in which the university can work with others to help address the needs of the state and the needs of people in need. So it is my great pleasure, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Shandon Sen. Shandon?
Thank you, Fred. Thank you very much for those very kind, generous words, as you always are with all of us, and we really appreciate that. And Fred is the lifeline of much that happens in the research domain with IU. I was obviously not expecting him here because maybe I did not read my emails properly. Therefore, in some email, it must have alerted me that he would be there. But anyway, it's so nice to see you here, and I'm very thankful to the Rotary Club for taking this time to invite me, and so I may share some of these thoughts. Again, in these difficult times, I think the solution lies in all factions of society to come together and find a common ground. And community engagement is a big part of it. So I'm so glad to be part of this. Thank you. With that said, as we were in the last few minutes, I was changing some of my slides actually in the pre-meeting discussion. when I learned about the time allocated, I decided to take some of the introduction out. But during this discussion, as was playing out, I put that back because I thought, there's a diverse crowd here. So I'm going to spend more time on the broader strokes, and then some of the finer strokes, scientific strokes, in the Q&A, we can deal with that. With that, I'd like to share my screen, and let's just make sure that this happens well, and just let me know that you can see my screen as intended. Is that good?
Looks good. And did you share your computer audio?
Yes, it should be there. So when we hear about electricity, we think about physics, engineering, so on and so forth. But if one goes back to the history of electricity, electricity actually came to us as animal electricity. And if one takes a look at the historical records, the remote history, the electric eel is presented as the thunder of the Nile. And believe it or not, the thunder of the Nile was actually used in those days for therapeutic purposes to treat certain health disorders. So there is a deep-rooted connection between electricity and biology and medicine. Of course, we have embarked on this bandwagon of biochemical pharmacological drugs, and we have molded our thought into thinking that medicines primarily needs to be drug, but medicine can be other forces of nature, and electricity clearly plays a big role there. Now, if we think of electricity, and historically, much has been learned through experiences with lightning. And we are quite familiar with the history of the kite experiment of Benjamin Franklin. And following that, a few decades later, this very important experiment when Luigi Galvani was walking through a wet market. And as he was walking through the wet market and it was lightning, he found that some of those frog legs that were hung to be sold started twitching as if the frog was jumping. So that, sort of grabbed his attention, came back to his laboratory. And until then, he did not work on electricity and medicine. He was working on other areas that were not such successful. And then he did this experiment and he came up with this expression of animal electricity. So he took these electrodes of copper and zinc, and he connected the nerves of this recently dead frog to this copper and zinc, and tried to mimic this stuff that he saw in the wet market. And then he found that with each flash of lightning, indeed the frog legs twitched and jumped as if they were alive. And this essentially is the basis of all what today we know as electrophysiology. Now, if this thing is that old, what new are we discussing today? I want to draw a sharp contrast. Now, this electrophysiology is in the domain of what is known as neuromuscular electrophysiology, and the fact that skeletal muscle contraction requires the firing of the nerves is very well known. But all of that has been primarily, if you look, I think it was a couple of years ago that Time magazine had a cover, and they were talking about electrified medicine. And in that article, you would see that Time magazine was primarily covering this, meaning neuromuscular junction, nerve physiology, pain, so on and so forth. What was not so well known, and even now has just begun to unfold, is the new world of microbial electrophysiology. That is completely new. And people did not simply have any idea that microbes would have so much to do with electrify or bioelectricity. So if one looks at animal electricity, some people also call it as bioelectricity today. Again, these are in different parts of the animal kingdom. You have aquatic animals, for example, that have what is known as electrocyte, and these electrocytes actually generate significant voltage that these animals use to numb their prey and for hunting purposes. So electricity here is not generated in some other physical plant, it is generated in biology. Then there are static electricity. Think of the gecko trying to climb a wall, uses electrostatic forces to hold its in a paw with the wall. And similarly, you also have this set of animals that have electroreceptors. And they actually use the electroreceptors for navigation purposes, for hunting purposes, so on and so forth. And this is pretty well defined. The point I'm trying to make here is that the discussion of electricity in the context of medicine or biology is not far-fetched. There is plenty there. It's just that it is not considered to be a major discipline. With that said, I'm going to play a small video, and this video summarizes some of the work that was going on in the lab about a decade or so before this shelter-in-place notice was served. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of how, during the shelter-in-place, our line of thinking switched over and resulted in what we now know. But this is a 3-minute plus video aimed at a summary. I'll just play that now, and I hope the audio transfers well.
Microbes are essential to life on Earth. There are as many bacterial cells in and on our bodies as there are human cells. Most bacteria live symbiotically with humans, but when skin's protective barrier is breached, bacteria can enter and cause infection. If left unchecked by the immune system or antibiotics, bacteria can multiply, aggregate, and develop a biofilm for enhanced pathogenicity. A staggering 80% of chronic wound and surgical site infections are caused by bacteria sheltered within a biofilm. Bacteria commonly occur as free-floating planktonic microorganisms. When they invade a wound, they multiply rapidly to form aggregates. Using weak electrostatic interactions called van der Waals forces, they attach and adhere to the wound surface in a process known as electrostatic adhesion. Bacteria communicate through electrochemical signaling called quorum sensing that enables bacteria to sense the density of neighboring bacteria and instruct their activity. They secrete chemical messengers that communicate with other bacteria and are translated into genetic signals that alter their behavior. Simultaneously, electrical signaling is the result of ions released in waves from within bacteria. This ion wave coordinates bacterial metabolism, aiding in recruitment of neighboring bacteria and further transforming their behavior. When messaging between bacteria grows strong enough, they begin to behave as a coordinated aggregate. They signal each other to secrete an extracellular polymeric substance, or EPS, that creates a biofilm shield around the bacteria, making them less accessible to the immune system and antibiotics. As the biofilm structure grows and matures, it becomes more resistant to destruction, leading to prolonged wound inflammation and disrupted quality of healing. Bacteria in a biofilm aggregate move in different ways to infect new areas and settle deeper into tissues following debridement. The body's immune system, alone or in combination with a drug, can usually kill planktonic bacteria. This ability to mitigate infection is crucial for resolution of wound inflammation and healing progression. However, once bacteria form biofilm, they are protected from attack by most immune cells and antibiotics, making biofilm infections notoriously difficult to treat. Researchers recently found that application of an external electric field delivered by a wireless electroceutical dressing can both prevent bacteria from forming biofilm and disrupt an existing biofilm infection. Bacteria were able to sense the electric field from the device. In essence, this external electric field short-circuited bacteria's electrochemical signaling, disrupting their ability to quorum sense and carry out the interbacterial communications necessary for forming and maintaining biofilms. Additionally, it decreased adhesive forces between bacteria and the wound surface, disrupting their ability to attach to the surface, thus helping prevent secondary infection. With the biofilm structure dismantled, bacteria are more susceptible to immune system and antibiotic attack. Infection-associated wound inflammation can subside, and normal wound healing can proceed.
All right, I'm going to move on now with the rest of the talk with two summary points from that. One is that bacteria have their own Facebook, if you will. They have their own social network. And the currency, the language of that social network essentially are electrical signals. And if we go scramble their signal, then they cannot mount certain host offense systems that they normally do. I'll give a quick example and then move on. The quick example is we all know how difficult it is to get rid of antimicrobial resistance bacteria, or the AMR. In a bacteria, now we have a new generation antibiotic, and a few weeks later, a few months later, you have another set of bacteria that are now resistant to that antibiotic. We keep on generating new generation antibiotics, and the bacteria keep on presenting themselves with a resistant variety. So one of the first intellectual property that we generated after our team moved to IU about 18 months or so ago is the fact that we got about a dozen different difficult bacteria, including the most difficult MRSA, Candida auris outbreak organism from the CDC. And we have been now able to show that you take all these organisms and you put the antibiotic in them and they're resistant, as is claimed by everybody else. But the moment you subject the same organism to the same antibiotic in the presence of a particular electric field, they instantly become antibiotic sensitive. And so this is now a significant discipline that is now emerging. A little bit of this is now published, but we were holding back publication because the intellectual property piece is in progress. So on the screen, what you now see to your left and to your right are the examples of two different dressings or fabrics. The one that you see to your left was a dressing that was developed about a decade ago. And the company then approached me in 2012 saying that, look, we have this dressing and we'd like to find some use for it. And so about from 2012 to now, I've been working with them, and this company was backed by major Texan billionaire Paul Foster. So Paul came to my lab in Ohio State, and Paul essentially is in the oil refinery field, but he said, Chandan, if you can break into, I can put some resources in. And long story short, the fabric existed, and we came up with the finding that this fabric, which is made up of silver and zinc spotted on it in a particular geometric pattern, when it becomes wet with any bodily fluid, for example, I have a t-shirt made out of this where this has been printed onto spandex. So in this case, the example is polyester, but this can be printed on any surface, for example. So when I sweat, then it gets active in that you can detect up to what you see here, 0.8 volt or 800 some volt, about to the order of 1. And then this is enough to quote unquote electrocute the microbes. So these types of sportswears will never stink, including your socks will not stink. And so that's a practical example. The bigger point is that using these types of very mild electricity, you can actually dismantle and it can kill bacteria. What you see to the right, so to the left, what you see there is the field strength, the electric field strength is not tunable. You have that 1 volt and sometimes a little bit lower than that, depending on the medium or the context, and you're stuck with that. So we came up with another version, which is currently a university version. And here you actually have a hearing aid battery or some other form of conventional battery, and you can tune the field strength here. So these are the two different patterns. Both are currently being used in patients. And the one to the right is currently being used in patients at IU, and the one to the left is currently being used in patients worldwide because it's already FDA cleared. And I'm happy to note that the one to the right, just last week, I got a notice to the Department of Defense of an award, $1 million per year for 2 years to commercialize this dressing. So now we are moving forward with commercialization. The award is not yet active. We just received the congratulations letter. So maybe in 3 or 4 months, the award will be active. Going forward, what you see here is that fabric that you saw to the left. We call it the wireless electroceutical dressing, or the WED. And what you see here on your screen to your left, where it says placebo, are aggregates of bacteria indicative of what is known as a biofilm. Essentially, these are bacterial aggregates that you saw in that video was depicted as being surrounded by what is known as extracellular polymeric substance. And when these bacteria are embedded or encased in such cement-like substance, A, immune cells cannot access them, and B, antibiotics cannot access them. And by the way, these types of biofilm cannot be detected by any hospital test today, none. Patient will go home showing 0 infection and will die because of sepsis in 7 days, happened in our own place. So there is zero hospital test that can detect this form of aggregate infection. And the reason is when the current hospital tests are based on what is known as colony forming units, meaning the bacteria will grow and form colony, and that is how you detect infection. These bacteria in the aggregate format, they do not form colony. So they fly below the radar, if you will. So what you see here is the silver zinc dressing, which is our electroceutical dressing, and you see how those aggregates have been dismantled. And silver on its own also has some antimicrobial properties, but those properties are not sufficient to disrupt the aggregates. And as you see here with the silver alone fabric, you still have those aggregates, a little bit less, but you still have them. Now, if you take a bunch of bacteria, so what you see here in this plate, in this brown plate, is what is known as an agar gel. An agar gel is what you use to grow bacteria. So you release some bacteria on it, in this case, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is commonly found in surgical infections. And you see the dotted structures, meaning the plate is full of bacteria. And what you see underneath those are two pieces of fabric that are the placebo, that do not have the electroceutical property to it. But to the right, you see the electroceutical fabric, and then 5 millimeter above, no bacteria can grow. If you keep that fabric there, it has the electric field of this 5 millimeter, and on that agar, well suited to grow bacteria, no bacteria can grow. Absolute clearance. So this actually encouraged us, that is quite encouraging, that, and I was even more encouraged because this is not a drug. So the bacteria were not able to mount their drug resistance system to bypass this type of, an insult. So this Annals of Surgery is the topmost, is a high-ranked journal in the discipline of surgery. And we were able to just report, this is one of the first papers that came out after we moved to IU, that electrical field-based dressing disrupts. So there were two cases there, if you look at the bullet points below. One is, in one case, we allowed a burn to happen. And after we allowed the burn to happen, we covered the burn with this electroceutical dressing and then allowed a lot of bacteria to be in that location. And we were able to show that in the presence of the dressing, the bacteria could not colonize the burn wound. Point number one. Point number two, we had the burn and then we released all these pathogenic bacteria into it. Of course, this was not done in a human, this was done in a pig. As is the normal animal model for that. And we allowed the infection to establish itself for 7 days. And 7 days later, when the infection was fully established, and you have pus and all that you see in a poorly sort of infected wound, you see all of that. 7 days later, you come with this electroceutical fabric, and you could completely manage and rescue that infection and make that wound heal. With any other drug, you couldn't. So this therefore became quite an area of interest, at least in the area of surgical infection. Now, fast forward, all of a sudden came March 2020, and we were asked to go home and lay low. And of course, while we were laying low, we were wondering whether anything we knew could be actually brought to action to actually fight the problem that we are now confronted with. So that's when we huddled. And when we were huddling, we found out, so what you see here is just a cartoon of the coronavirus. And what you see at the center, that string-like structure, is what is known as single-stranded RNA, which is a property of this virus. It is a single-stranded RNA virus. And on the single-stranded RNA, you have what is labeled here as nucleocapsid. And we found that this virus, A, has an electrokinetic property. And that is a property of the virus that determines its stability. And we could measure that. And we measured that to be minus 30 millivolts. Importantly, we found, not our work, from the literature we read, that the association of the nucleocapsid to the string is electrostatic in nature. So we thought, aha, if this is electrostatic in nature, we can knock it off using an electrostatic field. So what do we have to lose? So we applied for being allowed to go back to the lab, which was granted by Fred Kitt's office. So a small team from our group went back to the lab and started testing that using this dressing that we already have, which is FDA cleared, can we quickly go and knock off that capsid? And if we did knock off that capsid, can we then affect the further infectivity of the virus? Because when we have these PPEs, for example, the mask or what have you, all these PPEs today in the market are based on filtration process. So if you have an N95, for example, it is just a very good effective filter that does not let the virus into our respiratory path. However, on the exterior of the mask, you have a whole lot of virus if you're in a stuck, and that is infection capable. So here the idea was, and when you're doffing the mask or taking off the mask, you could inadvertently, of course, infect yourself, or you could infect others. So the idea here was, if we could have a surface where upon contact, the virus would be neutralized to a point where it cannot further infect. As you know, outside the host, a virus cannot multiply. A virus can only multiply when it enters into a host. So outside a host, as on the mask, it is just a particle. It is nothing else than what I would call a nanoparticle. Now, if that nanoparticle is modified such that it loses infectivity, then our threat is substantially managed. So now, just bear with me a few experiments, but I'll let you try to explain in simple words. So what you have here is the electroceutical fabric, and this works good with both fabrics that I showed. So you have electroceutical fabric, and on the fabric you put the coronavirus. And once you put the coronavirus, you allow it to be on the fabric different intervals of time. In this case, 1 minute and 5 minutes. Then you recover the virus from the fabric. And once you recover the virus from the fabric, you then start doing some measurements. And these measurements are of two types. One, in which the size of the viral particle is measured, because a change in the size would reflect some also potentially change in function. So what you see up there is in A, you see the intact virus, and you will notice that it has a sharp peak at around 100 nanometers, and that's where the virus peak should be. But the moment it is touching the fabric for 1 minute, you see the size is clearly affected, where you see larger peaks appearing, so that the peak is moving sideward. So you have some shoulders, if you will, in this peak, meaning there is some viral aggregation going on. Now, viral aggregation doesn't mean it loses infectivity, but it means that some particular changes are happening in the virus. If you go to 5 minutes, clearly the peak size is much lower and the peak base is much broader. And essentially it is showing that clearly there are some phenotypic changes in the particle of the virus. Now, that was about the particle, if you may call it morphometry. Now, if you come to B, we are now directly measuring what is known as zeta potential. A zeta potential measures the electrokinetic property of the viral particle directly. And as you see with the red, it is somewhere around minus 30 millivolt. But once it is in contact with the fabric for 1 minute, that drops to about minus 15 millivolt. So as the zeta potential moves towards zero, we all know that it indicates instability of the particle. As the zeta potential moves, it doesn't matter, the minus and the plus doesn't matter, it's like a modulus. So if you had something that was 30, for a second we ignore the minus, and it is moving to 15, that means it is approaching zero, and that is instability. But if the 30 is approaching, say, 60, then that is increasing stability of the particle. So clearly what we see, upon 1 minute of contact with the fabric, you have the zeta potential that quickly drops. Now, once you have the fabric touching the virus for 1 minute, we then take it off. We take the fabric, we take it off the fabric. The fabric is no longer there. And then we show that to a cell that is provided by ATCC, the source. So this is a cell that is ideally suited. It has all the right receptors for viral infection. Okay, so this is the worst possible cell you can think of in your body, because they are the best cell to attract and get infected by that virus. So what you see in green are all the live cells. And under normal circumstances, when you did not put a virus, what you see in that black frame is hardly anything red, because all the cells are live. But once you show virus to these cells, you see how the green disappears in B, and that is indicative of loss of viability of the cells, meaning the virus is now starting to kill the cells, and these red signals start appearing, which validates a dead cell. So you see less green and more red in the situation B. In situation C, what we have is, again, we have the virus shown to, you may call it a sham fabric, meaning it is still polyester without that electroceutical dot. And the same thing happens, which is green goes down and red comes up. But if you show that virus to the electroceutical fabric, even for 1 minute, you would see that nothing happens to the green and no red comes up. And all of this can be quantitated, and upon quantitation using that assay that I just showed in A, and another assay that complements the other assay in B, the moral of the story is that once that virus touches that fabric for 1 minute, it cannot any further infect and kill the most ideally suited cell that it is supposed to be infecting. So that was very encouraging. With that said, the take-home message from here is that the exposure of coronavirus to a fabric with electric field changes the particle size and electrokinetic potential and causes loss of infectivity. But point number 2, I think, is more important, which is this entire story is not about a fabric. This entire story is about the principle of using electric field to keep a room clean, the air clean, the bed clean. You can have electroceutical fabrics, like hospital fabrics are a major source of infection. So this opens up a complete new range of possibilities where the mask is just a small example. The fact that the coronavirus would favorably respond to, favorably for us, not favorably for the virus, to electric field is a finding, is a novel finding that can be exploited in numerous ways, in cleaning air, in cleaning room, furnishing, so on and so forth. So that's where I think a lot of thought is needed about how to dispense electric field in a profitable way, profitable for us, such that this virus can be managed as it is present in the larger society. I'll pause there and take some questions. Thank you so much for your attention. And of course, I need to thank our major sponsors, both from the US federal government. With that, I'd be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Wow, that's very impressive. Thank you so much for opening this new horizon for our health improvement for the future. Do we have any questions?
When will these masks be available to the public?
So I have had now a meeting with so FDA has a process called emergency use authorization. And as you can imagine, they are now flooded with requests for EUA. And thankfully, our case has been shortlisted. And I had to meet a panel of 5 FDA members, which has now happened. After I have met, they have now sent us a few other questions, half of which is science, but half of which has to do with logistics and manufacturing. Good news is all of this is manufactured currently within the US. None of this has to come from abroad. So that process is currently on. When the FDA thinks that all the criteria have been met, then it will be approved. I'm hoping within a matter of weeks, and then it should be. And in the meanwhile, the company is telling me that they're ramping up production. They've already ramped up production. They're ready.
I have a question. Going back to the whole concept of the electricity being therapeutic, how does that relate to the work with the brain that's happening?
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. And that brings me back to my slide on Luigi Galvani. That is how, the whole story of electrophysiology started with nerve, muscle, and then went to the brain and deep brain stimulation. Now, that field is much more developed in that the neuromuscular junction and the nerve responds to electricity very well developed. But that microbes respond to electricity, and that can be profitably used to manage infection is an emergent field. But clearly the two are connected.
Thank you. Very interesting. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, ma'am.
And Dr. Sen, how does this all relate to the existing work on electrostatic air filters, for example?
So I think in principle, one would expect that there would be some effect. One issue with the air filter is it needs to be carefully studied as to how long is the exposure of the virus. Now, for a fabric, 1 minute is a short time. But when air is passing through some type of a surface, well, the amount of contact they have, is that sufficient to inactivate or neutralize the virus just calls for a proper study. Actually, yesterday I got a call from a federal agency saying that they use the same electrostatic force I use on the fabric, they use for fingerprinting. So they were saying, can we use also that for cleansing the fingerprinter? And that's where, so that has now started. So all these thoughts are coming out, and I really welcome that. And clearly all of that is not up to us to solve, but I can help a whole bunch of other people who may run with it and bring a whole range of solutions. Good questions. Thank you for asking.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sen, I'm Raj Hadawi. I live in North Carolina, and I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon. Years past, we have high degree of mortality rate in extensive burn wounds. And as you know, the antibiotic effective quite a bit, then we have resistance. And we ended in losing too many patients on that. Since you started, or whoever started, the bandages contain the electrocute in them to help the victims, have we improved the mortality rate of the extensive burn patient? And a follow-up on this bacteria find out a way of avoiding the electrical current, which you initiated by the bandages.
Oh, very good question. And I wish I could say that yes, it helps improve the outcome. But the fact is that the first clinical trial has been now funded by the Department of Defense 2 years ago. And that trial, because I am conflicted in intellectual property and commercial interest with this, I cannot personally do it, but I am a co-investigator. The trial is currently happening at the San Antonio Military Medical Center in their burn unit. So that clinical trial is the first with this, a randomized clinical trial, and the outcome of which will then decide how this can be used in a clinical setting. So that's the answer to that. Secondly, the multi-drug resistance pathways that the bacteria uses to acquire resistance against drug do not work against this, because this is a physical force. And so that's what and this, interestingly, as you know, for every bacteria or say an yeast or say a virus, you have different antimicrobials that you need. But we have now tested a range of MRSA, the Staph aureus, Pseudomonas, Candida albicans, Candida auris, and a total of dozen. All of those are sensitive to the same electric field range. So that makes it a very universal, so that's what is exciting. Now, over time, will they be able to acquire resistance? So far, we have not seen that, but that is something that we have to carefully follow and see how that works out. What we are seeing is, if you give an extremely weak electric current, there could be a field or so, a colony or so that acquires some resistance. But if we have this other version that I showed you to the right of your screen, which is the tunable variety, you can crank up the power. The human would still be completely safe, and you would get rid of that. So in this case, you don't have to dose like you normally dose a drug, because this is at the flip of a switch in your cell phone. You can crank up the power, and you can get rid.
Oh, Sandy, did you have a question? Your sound.
Dr. Sen, this might have already been asked about the electrostatic power. There's the science of negative and positive ions and how they affect the outer rim membrane of viruses and bacteria. Is that something along this research that is applicable?
Very much so, ma'am. I'm glad that you asked that. I skipped some of those details, but you're absolutely right. This electric signaling that the bacteria does is purely caused by movement of ions, and they have these voltage-gated ion channels, the VGIC, voltage-gated ion channels, primarily aimed at moving potassium ions in a way that then gives them these pulses. So what you say is directly related mechanism-wise to what I'm saying.
Okay, Liz
Very
Feidel,
exciting.
yes, Liz Feidel was asking also whether the fabric would lose its potency over time.
So a very good question. Thank you for asking. Because this is now a fabric in the commercial domain, this has been now tested for what they call machine wash. And I forget if it is 10 or 12 washes it can take. After that, the metal starts degrading. So very long story, very short. You have metals deposited on the fabric, but using something that is known as binder chemistry. And clearly the binder chemistry has its own limits. And that limit is about 10 to 12 washes in the machine.
Dr. Sen, you have been so gracious to give us this time and this information in a very understandable presentation. I'm just so grateful for this. Do you happen to have time to stay for 2 more minutes while we close up the meeting? And perhaps,
I would be happy to.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
In honor of your presentation, we're going to give a donation to Centerstone, which is a United Way agency. And now Ashley Sullivan, our president-elect, will tell us about next week.
If I may briefly interrupt, and
yes.
if you'll please let me know, I would like to match that donation.
Well, thank you very much. We will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Our next celebration of service will be July 7th on Zoom, and it will probably be our club's first virtual leadership changeover in 102 years. Interesting. We'll continue to do pre-meeting social gatherings like we did today, and it will be our leadership changeover meeting, as I said. The main changes are that Aaron will become our immediate past president, and I will assume the presidency, while Sally Gaskell will become president-elect. The officers and the board will remain the same, and Aaron will provide some reflection on his year as president and will present the Service Above Self Award. I'll share a glimpse of my vision for the new year and how Rotary opens opportunities, which we've definitely seen here today.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. I'll close with my thought of the week, and then we'll recite the 4-way test, which is our central ethical statement. But my thought of the week is from Margaret Mead, one of my favorites. Always remember that you are unique, just like everyone else. And now, if you will join me for our 4-way test, +1. Of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth?
To all.
Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendship? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun?
Thank you, past President Aaron.
Thanks, Al. Well done. Are there more questions, comments on this incredible research? Jim Bright.
Dr. Sen, I just want to thank and congratulate you for heading up this research. I think indeed you've brought honor and glory to Indiana University and to Bloomington, Indiana, and the whole state of Indiana. My question is, I know you're focused on the science of the face mask, but what do you see as the size of the market for this product once the FDA approves it? I mean, how many units do you think can be sold, and you know, do you see them being used by healthcare workers primarily, or healthcare workers and other groups of people?
Well, very good question, but I may not be the best person to answer this. The CEO of our company, Mike Nagel, tells me that at this time it is a $4.7 billion market. And, you know, frankly, what has motivated us is at this time to get the solution to the market in a way that people benefit. How they actually commercialize, that's more for the company. But I can also tell you that at 3 p.m. today, there is a large capital group that I hear they're the largest capital group in Indiana is talking to me about doing a 500 patient study on this particular fabric within Indiana. And so there are different interest groups that are stepping forward, and they think it is not just only for this particular outbreak, but going forward, they want us to test whether this works against swine flu. There are all these other types of microbes, and do we always have to do this when we are in shelter in place, or can we do this in advance and already have solutions tucked away for when we need? I wish I could give you a more pointed answer on the market, but all I know is a lot of people need help.
Do you have a manufacturing company to do this already?
Oh yes. It's in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's already manufactured and exported to all different countries for other reasons, for wound care. So and they have ramped up this, and so yes, it's in Arizona.
Interesting. So it's available to wound care now?
Yes, today, yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's in the market.
Thank you.
I saw your, at the end of your presentation, this is Tim Jennison, you had the National Institute of Health and some other associations of yours. What is your opinion of the associations in this country right now that are dealing with the coronavirus? That is the CDC and the other national and international organizations.
I think everybody is trying to do their best. Having said that, with no, frankly, we are building the plane as we fly it, and we should not be in this position. I can only talk about myself personally. Personally, I feel as a scientist, my community has failed the larger society. That grandpa, that grandma, that kid in the kindergarten should not have to worry about this if we did everything right. We should have seen this coming. We should have prepared. I'm not blaming anybody but myself. But I think when I turn back to my own colleagues, we need to introspect where we went wrong. This is not how we can run society. Everybody has a role, and so does scientists, and we should have been better prepared. And that's all I can tell about our entire community as a whole. A lot of introspection needed.
Hey, Dr. Sen, I have a quick question for you. I have a quick question for you. I come from the music world, and there's a big concern about environmental spaces, classrooms, concert halls, and what have you. And I'm just wondering if there's any research being done in the area that you're involved that has to do with physical spaces.
It's very interesting that you bring that up, because the symphony orchestra in Pittsburgh has contacted me about the wind-blowing equipment that are aerosolizing, and they're trying to manage that electroceutically. So I'm working closely with them to manage, and because they have been given the solution of being within plexiglass chambers, and they don't like it because that has a lot of bad effects. So yeah, people are interested, and we are working together. They're interested. So things are.
I would love to find out more about that on behalf of the Jacobs School.
I want your name, yes.
Okay.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Please do.
Well, Dr. Sen, Rotary is a global organization, and what you're doing in Indiana is just wonderful. We love you, but we love you as humans on this planet, and we salute your work. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
In the midst of this tragedy, bringing forth your creativity and your management skills.
Hope.
Thank you, sir. This is, as I mentioned, all of us, whatever we do in a university setting, we must be enabled by people like Fred Kate. And I'm very fortunate that in a very short time, when we said we want to come back and test this, when everybody else had to be going home, and it is no fun to actually apply for permit for the coronavirus when everybody's running away from the virus, and you have zero experience working with the virus, and guess what? We applied for a USDA permit, we got the virus, and now we are exposing means having some fellows and researchers to work with it. So it takes a team effort, and the fact that people like you stand by us and encourage us is a big deal. So thank you for all the effort that you guys made, to pull together, and for having me here to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did your research put you and your fellow research colleagues at health risk in working on this project?
Yes, it did. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with the thing is that did we then get infected? The answer is no. So we did everything right. But I will also tell you, and maybe you don't want to hear, and maybe I shouldn't say, but I will say because it is spontaneously coming to my mind. You know, I have been accused of, terrorism. That this lab working on the virus may be enriching it for terrorism purposes. So I was subject to investigation, and so was my entire team. Thank God we came out clean. And we had to go through that. And I'm not blaming anybody, but once you choose this path, all types of scrutiny come to on you, and people are wondering, why the heck is this guy running towards the problem when everybody else is running away from the problem? So when I turn back to my team and I see tears in their eyes, I tell them, don't worry, this is a part of the deal. So when these investigators come, just sort of cooperate with them, and you have to subject yourself to these standards. This is a part of the game. So there's also a learning process. It is not just, and everybody, whoever complained, I don't think they did it out of any ill intent. They also want to be safe to make sure they don't have some crooked person in the society utilizing this opportunity to actually cause further damage. So I don't blame them at all. It is just that I accepted to go down this path. So it's just a flavor, for you to understand how it works.
That is absolutely amazing. Wow.
That's called leadership and vision. And thank you so much.
You're very courageous, Dr. Sen. Thank you for your work.
I hope some people benefit, and that's all I can wish for. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, let's close this meeting. Thank you so much.
To you all. I'm going to put the video up on the YouTube channel as well. So just
good.
Yeah. Thank you. And Aaron, thank you for another absolutely amazing meeting.
Right.
Here, here.
Goodbye, all. See you. Bye.